guys, and welcome in to this little area we call Are We Caught Up Yet podcast. You can find us on youtube.com/Save the Game Media and podcast services. If you do want to show Save the Game Media some extra love and get early access to all of our content, you can find us at patreon.com/Save the Game Media. Today, I am joined by my co-host and friend, Sam. How are you today?
So, I'm good. Little tired, but that's one, not out of the ordinary, and two, the sacrifices you need to make for democracy and liberty, right?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yeah.
Sam's actually moving to the U.S. to sacrifice for democracy.
Yeah, I've kind of missed the ship on that, though, because I think you sacrificed democracy a long time ago, didn't you?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing good. Nothing crazy. I always forget that, like, when people listen to this isn't like when we record. So it's always like, oh, I just recorded No Limits yesterday. So, same as No Limits. But in the timeline of Are We Caught Up Yet, this isn't going up for like 2 weeks, just over. So yeah. Sorry, you guys. I'm still doing good the next day, but 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Have you been watching anything?
No, I don't think so. Because we'd already said last time, I think, that I'd finished Shogun, finished Fallout.
Mm-hmm.
I did. I did try Three Body Problem on Netflix.
Ooh, I've heard really good things about the book, not the show. But
yeah, I heard good things. I mean, I didn't really, to be fair, I didn't research and I didn't really pay attention in whether the discussion I saw that was positive was aimed at the book or the show. I didn't really pay attention to it. The show, in my opinion, is unforgivably bad. Like atrocious. It's so strange because every single individual element of the show should be something that I adore. And just none of it comes together. The writing is abysmal. And there are some named actors, like the guy who plays Wong, Benedict Wong. He's in it and he's good. And there are a few other sort of notable names, and they all do fine. They're mostly just sort of kind of playing themselves, though, which isn't a problem. But it's not like they're really doing interesting character work. But there are some actors in that show that are horrifically bad, and I think like the characters that they're playing certainly aren't done any favors by the script, but most people can tell, I think, when someone's doing bad acting. But like, as someone who is professionally trained in this thing, I am gobsmacked at the ineptness of how they handled, admittedly, poor dialogue, but they handled it almost worse than how bad the dialogue is. So yeah, I'm not continuing with that, which is unsurprising considering the roasting I just gave it. I'm sure it could probably get interesting and maybe improve as it goes on, but like nothing has hooked me in like 2.5 episodes, and I just like, for how bad I'm feeling it is, I can't power through it. So that's done.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. Again, everything about it I should love, and I love none of it. Like the premise, the setting, all of the visuals, the twists and turns, the mystery stuff going on, the sci-fi is all right up my alley, and none of it hit, which is not a good sign.
Bummer.
Yep.
Maybe read the book. I don't
know. See, this is the problem. I think, perhaps unfairly, I am now going to be more disincentivized to read the book because of how bad my experience with the show has been. So even if I know statistically, probably with how positive you clearly know that the books have been received, I assume, or book, I'm sure if I picked it up and started reading it, it would be infinitely better than the show. But the show has painted such a bad image. I'm just probably going to be forever too hesitant to pull the trigger on that and read it. But you never know. If I research into it a little bit more and the book is like proclaimed as something great, then maybe. But I wouldn't hold out hope for that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Stuff happens.
It does.
Okay. What was I gonna say? I don't remember. My brain's already gone.
Never mind. What have you been watching?
Well, I watched a 3-hour movie yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ. No one warned me that it was 3 hours. Not that you should, but like seriously. So yeah, I watched that. I rewatched all of Severance with my family because I hadn't seen it. That was a fun experience. Mild spoilers for the show. I'm not gonna like fully spoil, but if you understand context of the show, you might get spoiled. So just be careful, I guess. But I when you're rewatching it, Cobell says a lot of stuff like Milchuk will be like, he's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you putting these two together in the same room? And she's like, oh, I'm just experimenting and stuff like that. And like, so she's like saying, like, she's spoiling stuff for the end of the show pretty early on. And obviously, you don't catch that the first watch through. You're like, huh? But
yeah,
it's interesting. Rickon is still the worst. Rickon drives me crazy, you guys. So, yeah. Have I watched anything else? I've been watching anime, but we have an anime podcast for that. You guys should check that out. It's called That Time We Got Reincarnated as an Anime Podcast. And yes, that is the whole name. And yes, that's very anime of us, but what can you do? What can you do? Maybe someday we'll get Sam to watch a bunch of anime.
Nope.
Turn him into a degenerate.
Nope.
I wouldn't be so sure.
I would.
Really? You don't think after Marvel we might do Ghibli films or something like that?
I mean, but that's
anime.
It's detached though, isn't it? It's
it's not.
Ghibli is a separate entity in and of itself, devoid from the rest of what is traditionally viewed as anime.
You know, if Hayao Miyazaki heard you, he would be really excited you said that.
I'm a bootlegger.
He calls all of the anime fans degenerates, basically, which is true. But
yes, it's almost like it's the truth. Yeah.
You haven't seen Boy and the Heron, right?
Nope.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I haven't. I mean, like obviously we haven't decided what we're watching after Marvel, and we've got quite some time. But I do think that Ghibli would be a good option. I actually think that it would be kind of fun to go through like all of like there's like the big 3 directors of anime films. I think it'd be fun to go through all of their movies and get Sam caught up on some anime films, but who knows? Avatar would be cool as well. I don't know. Choices. We'll think about it. We've got several months.
Indeed.
Somehow. I feel like when I'm looking at the content and it's like, oh, this came out in 2021, 2022, whatever. And we're still like only halfway through. I'm like, what have you guys been doing this past 2 years? Calm down.
We're at the boom of Disney Plus content.
Okay. Okay, you guys. So today we are talking about Eternals. I hope you did a drum roll in your head. So first, general thoughts. See, this is why we need to do another show, because me doing general thoughts first every time is killing me. My general thoughts on Eternals are is that I think that this film was really, really good. And I think that there were some glaring issues with it as well. I think that because the story was so rich and so interesting, and the world building that they were doing was so interesting, that the issues with the film became even more glaringly obvious, because it wasn't like, the story isn't like a throwaway like Marvel film. The story is like this really crazy, like in-depth, here's all this back history, here's all this information, like really, really like building into like the depths of this world. And so to have some of the pieces of the movie kind of still treated like that, like shallow Marvel film, was really disappointing. But overall, I would say I really enjoyed the film.
Okay. This is like, for so many different reasons, probably the most interesting conversation that we're going to have, or one of, at least.
Okay.
Because I'm right alongside you.
Mm-hmm.
That the film is really good, in my opinion, but not to set any kind of expectation or preconception in your head, but this film began what to some was a continual decline for Marvel. And that's for a number of reasons. Like, before this film came out, they were marketing it in a very different way. Chloe Zhao was obviously an Oscar-winning director for Nomadland, and they were hyping this. Everyone was hyping this film up from Marvel side, saying that it was a very different film from them. You know, trying to not necessarily get away from the schlocky action stuff that they've been criticized for being pigeonholed as, but doing something new and different and interesting. You know, there were even some, I think even Kevin Feige said that it was, in his opinion, that the best film that they've made. And I think that doing all of that pre-release, then into release and reception after the fact, there was a disconnect there. And like, it's not really an over promise, under deliver. It's just still technically an over promise, I guess. I think the film zigged when people thought it was going to zag. You know, it gave people something different and interesting, like they were saying, but it came in a very different package than I think people were hoping for. You know, people were hoping for this millennia spanning epic, and there's tons of awesome action and this stacked cast and stuff. And it's a far more slow burn film that is far more thematic than it is focused on action. And I love that as a person that particularly enjoys any kind of media that is thought-provoking and gets me to think and actually engage with the content, even though turning your brain off every now and then is still fun. So that's why I like this film. But I think that as I think you nailed it, really, your opening salvo was perfect, that it's a really good film that is hampered in a number of different areas by either things that are just a little bit off base or actively kind of bad. So yeah, it's a real mixed bag is wrong, because I don't think it is. I think it's a strong film with a few issues that are more glaring than other issues in other films, and therefore they feel like bigger problems, but I don't think in reality they are, in comparison to the quality of the rest of the film that they do execute well, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just, let me ask this is one of the things that I wanted to ask you. Is Eternals from the comics, or is this a movie original?
No, this is, I mean, yeah, it's from the comics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know, because at this point, like, I don't know, like, this is one of the times where I'm like, maybe I should go to the comics, because, like, I don't know, this was something that I was like, holy cow, this is such an incredible story here, and I can just feel the movie kind of falling apart at the seams, but like you can feel how incredible like that story base is, which is why the movie did any good at all. So I don't know, I just like, I want this to be like not just a comic. I just want to read this as like a book, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
I mean, like, and to be clear, like, the story as it exists in this film isn't like a 1-for-1 with a comic.
of course not.
But the general sentiment, the team, the against the deviants thing, the Celestials and all of that, that is, it's just that they've obviously sort of devised an original kind of story within that framework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Man, there's so much here. There's so much good here, you guys. I just want to like shake my fist at Marvel. Like, can't you just?
Yeah, I feel like, again, to me, it's kind of a double-edged thing where the blame lies on both sides. Where this came again, like the proliferation of the Disney Plus stuff, and followed off of a mixed bag in terms of films and their receptions. Like Black Widow was good, but it wasn't received like crazy hot. And then Shang-Chi came out and everybody loved it. And then this, and then after this, technically the next film is a Spider-Man film, right? So people were like hyped for that, clearly. But then there's this in the middle, and it was a completely, brand new entire team of new people that we've never met before. How are they going to handle that? So I think like over promising from Marvel and not quite executing on it on the creative side. Like, eyes bigger than their belly is kind of what I perceive it as, where they were really shooting for the stars with this film and like trying to go all out and take it up a notch, and they got like 70% of the way there. And I also think that it's kind of the Marvel fan base being a little bit entitled and hypocritical, because we were at this time, or a lot of people, the general sentiment was that Marvel needs to change the stuff that they're doing, because it is just homogenous for the most part. And how do you do stuff different after Endgame without just like starting over and doing the same thing again, And here Eternals is, and it's a completely different film that is different in tone, in pacing, in thematics, in visuals than anything we've seen before. And people, not only for the flaws, which we'll talk about, but just in general, were very dismissive and non-accepting of this film as it was. And I think that that's a bit ignorant. Like, this is the kind of film that Chloe Zhao has made, and she said she was making a Chloe Zhao film. And I'm all about allowing directors, to a wide degree, having full creative control over their projects. And that's what they gave Chloe, and I can appreciate that as a creative. I prefer that than micromanaging to the nth degree, even if it means a messier product at the end of the day, which this is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Where do we want to? Actually, we'll go ahead and just start with our usual, just because I think this one will be easy. Soundtrack was good, not great. I think that they used some interesting like tones as well as interesting like instruments that they don't maybe normally use. Um, I think that they were trying to do something with the soundtrack. I think I'd have to like listen to the soundtrack itself, like, but it feels like they were trying to do something with like mixing instruments from different cultures and kind of like doing this like mixture. And I don't think that it worked very successfully for me.
Okay.
But I also don't like hate the music. Like, I think it was good. I'm glad that they tried to do something interesting. And it was better than the generic pile of nothing that we usually get. But
Yeah, I mean, they got Ramin Djawadi in as the composer, who has done a lot of stuff, including Game of Thrones. And I think like this feels very Game of Thrones to me, which makes sense because again, it's trying to be like this epic saga type tale with a whole host of characters, and different dynamics and stuff, and expanding the world, and there's lore and mythology to everything. But I would agree that overall, outside of the main theme, there's not really anything that I remember. I think there's like a few riffs and motifs that they come back to, which is good. But outside of that, it's sort of
yeah.
Take it or leave it.
Okay. Well, for this one, just because there's a lot that I want to talk about, I'm going to kind of let my brain wander and we'll just see where the conversation takes us rather
Sure.
than trying to structure it. Just because I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's too much I want to talk about. So I think that'll stress me out. Um, one thing I want to start with, and like, I want to ask you as like, obviously somebody that has studied acting. I feel like some of the performances were really poor in comparison to others and stood out extremely. And I just wanted to check, like, it feels to me that it was more like script writing than the actors not being good. But I wanted to check with you and see like what your take on it was because I don't really know a lot of these actors. But
You don't know Angelina Jolie?
no,
What? She's like,
I'm just kidding.
okay.
No, it's
Who?
just so okay. Some of these people I do know, but I don't think I've seen them in like acting. Like for example, the person who plays Kingo,
Mm-hmm.
and the person who plays Gilgamesh. I've definitely not seen him before.
Hmm.
I think that he had some good, like specifically Gilgamesh is the one that I was like sometimes like the lines that he was delivering, I was just like nails on a chalkboard for me, and it really took me out of the movie. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't tell if it was like, not that I'm saying that actor's terrible, but like maybe like this just wasn't a good role for him, or if it's just like the writing was really terrible for certain characters?
Like, what I'm glad we're on the same page, because I think that Gilgamesh is the weakest of them, which is funny because he's
The
framed as the
strongest.
strongest.
Yeah.
But in terms of like performance, I think again, nothing is really simple when talking about this film, because I think it's, yes, the writing, but more specifically, I think it's the fact that they framed a non-native English speaking actor as not only comic relief, but also one of the characters that has the most emotional stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
Yes.
like Don Lee as an actor, obviously incredibly prolific in Korean
Oh,
stuff.
he was in Train to Busan. Forget what I said. He
Yes,
was great in Train to Busan.
exactly. Like he is a very big actor, and I don't doubt his talent. So I think it's more that the way, I think his character would have worked fine, but the way that he was framed and utilized in the film itself didn't do him any favors.
No, that's such a bummer.
Because like out of the entire main cast, he's the only one who's not like very, very fluent English speaking. Because you could say, you know, like Salma Hayek is Spanish, but she speaks very good English, you know. And Don Lee can clearly speak English, but I think that there's a lot of nuance given to Gilgamesh. And again, not criticizing Don Lee, I just don't think that, I think there was lost in translation, both literally and figuratively.
That's such a bummer because I
Yeah.
think that like that one really like it was uncomfortable sometimes because of how much it stuck out.
Yeah.
You know? But and you're so right like that like Gilgamesh as a character is such an interest like has some really interesting emotions where it's like he's watching over this other person for thousands of years
Mm.
just because he loves her and like isn't asking for anything in return. And I could be wrong, but this read as a very platonic relationship to me. And
Yeah.
I don't think we get to see like I think that a lot of the time stories put a lot of emphasis on romantic love and not platonic love. And platonic love I think is kind of what most people experience the most of.
Mm-hmm.
So I really loved seeing that
Yeah.
portrayed
Yeah.
so
Like I
strongly.
think
Um,
because a lot of the characters clearly sort of fall into like stereotypical um, roles, right? And
mhm.
Gilgamesh is like the brute with a hardened exterior but has a warm heart, you know, and that would work perfectly fine. He is the bruiser, you know, the brute of the group, but he is one of, if not the most compassionate. Um, and yeah, it's just doesn't quite translate. And like again, saying that him not being fluent English speaking is specifically the problem. It's not. It's a multitude of reasons that I think all confound upon each other, that
What about
makes it just
Kingo?
not work. I really like Kamal Nanjiani. He got like bulked for this film. If you look at how he used to look compared to how he looks now, he looks the way he does now and in this film for this film. If you Google him and you see he's like just a scrawny little comedian guy.
Yeah, see, that's where I know him from, is just being a comedian. So I was
Yeah.
like kind of thrown off. Which not to say that he wasn't funny in this movie. He was. Just to be very
Yeah.
clear, he was funny. Holy
Um,
cow. Yeah, he has beefed up.
yeah. Yeah. I think he has the same issue as Gilgamesh in a weird way, where the character could work and there's like interesting nuance there. Like I know we're jumping the gun kind of, but at the end when he just refuses to take part, he doesn't show up
Oh,
at all.
okay. For reals though, I know we'll get into the ending more later, but because we're talking about it, them committing to that story piece where it's like he doesn't come back, like he doesn't like rejoin the fight. He says like I don't agree with you, but I can't hurt you. I love
Yeah.
you. Leaves. Oh my god, and they commit
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
writing, you guys. Okay, anyways, keep going.
I think like all of that again is really interesting, but having that kind of really compelling introspective stuff happening at a crucial third act moment rings a little hollow, actually quite hollow, when it's coming from the comic relief character. I feel like I get such whiplash from that moment because yes, it's sort of peppered throughout the film that Kingo is more loyal to Icarus than anybody else, really. But it's just such a weird heel turn that it doesn't read
See,
properly to me.
okay, this is where I geek out because can you imagine if we had spent like a book's worth of time building these characters where everybody like continuously because we only hear them call him boss like a couple times, right? But let's say like this is expanded into like a whole book. They continuously call him boss. We see him following Icarus around, like we get like this whole like thing, and then that happens. Like it would have been such a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Uh, this is
I
why I love
think
books.
I think like generally speaking to that point, this would have been better as a show
Oh yeah.
because you could segment it in the different time periods if you wanted to, and obviously expand it because of that. And you could set up the mystery of Ajax's death early, like the film does, but you could, I don't know, I think formatting it in a show gives more breathing room for the characters. Just speaking about like Kingo's heel turn giving me whiplash, the film just in general kind of gives me whiplash because they introduce and establish all the characters enough that I understand dynamics, I understand how this character behaves and the kind of things that they think, but it all happens at such a blistering speed that it only really comes after the fact. You aren't really absorbing all of it as it's happening because even though the film has a slow pace,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that they're trying to barrel through even within this 3 hours, which is like really ambitious. You've got to give it to them, but you're not doing yourself a service on any of those fronts by trying to cram all of this potentially excellent stuff into this arbitrary runtime.
Yeah, I think like a lot of like you're saying like a lot of the story stuff like comes from like you thinking about the story and like
Mhm.
interacting like the audience interaction rather than what's being told on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of sad, but too
Yeah.
late
Now,
now.
I have a question for you.
Oh no, okay.
We've discussed a couple of characters that we have an issue with, but I need to know
Mm-hmm.
who is your favorite Eternal.
My favorite Eternal. Um, okay, so this is kind of like a two-part answer.
Okay.
So fastest, I think is probably would be like my pick of like they're my favorite. I
Mm-hmm.
think I would like if you asked me after another watching, I might say somebody else. Um, I think there's none of the characters I dislike. Like I think all
Yeah.
of the characters are really incredible. However, I will say I do have kind of a really big crush on Barry Keoghan. so
I see.
So it's pretty easy for me to say that Drug's my favorite.
Fair.
Uh,
Fair.
I know what I'm doing too. Like he's just kind of like a white dude, you know? And
He
like
is. Yes.
yeah, he just like there's nothing really like, you know what I mean? Like he there's it's not like he's like the most attractive person ever, but man, Like, he is so hot.
So have you watched Saltburn? Or?
No, I have not. I do know what happens, but
Might want to watch that.
yeah, I probably should. But
Or are you, even if you just like skip to like the last 10 minutes, that's probably enough for you, I'd say. From the
no,
sounds of
I
it.
think he's very, very handsome, and also, but when I was watching the film, you guys, just because I'm funny, I was like, oh my god, that's Sabrina Carpenter's boyfriend, which is true. But yeah, I think that he's obviously he has an awesome accent. Um, and yeah, he kind
Okay.
of usually plays like that, like tortured soul kind of character, which I think is it's usually my weakness. So, um, to be fair, I didn't really stand a chance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's like my twofold answer, where it's like the
Okay.
simping gets to me just a little bit. So maybe Drake.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Who's your favorite?
It's Makari. She's
I really
just
like Makari.
dope. I mean, obviously, goes without saying the representation is great to have
That's what I wanted to talk about next.
a deaf actress playing the role, and obviously, I actually don't know what heritage Lauren Ridloff has. I'm gonna have to Google that to make sure I don't misspeak. I mean, obviously she's American, but I just didn't know.
Mexican American father and an African American mother.
Yeah. So obviously representation on multiple fronts is sort of the point I'm getting at. I just think that she's definitely underutilized. Like, I wish we had so much more of her. It's a shame that.
Go ahead.
Me?
No, I was just gonna. Sorry, my brain. So I think that. No, I was just gonna say. Yeah. No, I think that she would be my favorite if they had used her more. Like, her character just wasn't really there.
Yeah, because like the way the film is structured, it's like for the most part they are one by one collecting up all the Eternals until they're all back together. And it's unfortunate that she's like the last one they get. But I still think that she stole the show for me. And like getting into like the more nerdy side of things, which is far less important than the representation and everything, but the way that they depict super speed in this film is the best I've ever seen in anything. I think not only when she's just running and zipping around the world, but also how she uses it in fights when she's, because all the usual tropey stuff is that if it's super speed you go into slow motion, right, to see everything around the person running fast going slowly from their perspective, how they perceive it. But like, that's so overplayed now. It's been used so many times in so many different things, most of which you probably haven't seen, to be fair. But particularly in the superhero space, like, there are countless examples of speedsters being depicted that way. So to have just essentially real-time portrayal but still be able to follow her in those moments, and get a real sense of how quick she is, which is what you lose when things go into slow motion, I think was really refreshing. And again, talking about like relationships, clearly her and Druig more romantic than platonic, but I also appreciate that even within that there was restraint. Like, they weren't kissing or anything. There was just
gross,
very clear affection. I think the furthest they get is putting their heads together when they reunite. yeah, I like that there's a spectrum there, and God forbid if we don't see Makari again sooner rather than later, I'm gonna lose my mind
Would you
because
go ahead?
no,
Because
ask your question.
because
I was just going to say because of all of the Eternals, she is technically speaking the most unique in the sense that we don't have any other speedsters around currently. We had Pietro, but he's dead.
Rest in peace.
So rip. So we kind of, I to me, a comic book in comic book form or a comic book depicted in live action like the MCU is, it isn't complete if there isn't at least one super speedster. I feel like that's like one of the first superpowers that people can think of. You know, when you think of superpowers, you think of flying, you think of like telekinesis, maybe invisibility, and then super speed is probably the next one. So yeah, and spoiler, she hasn't reappeared since, so I'm sad.
Okay. Good to know. Would you say that Makari is on your simplest?
No, because again,
Okay.
well, I think it's very, very, very plausible that she could be, but again, she isn't given enough to do here for me to know definitively. You know, all it would really take is for her to make a subsequent appearance in something, show up as a supporting character, and like out of nowhere, let's say, I don't know, in Shang-Chi 2, he's like fist fighting with a guy. He's going toe to toe. They're pretty equally matched, and then Shang-Chi's on the back foot. He gets beaten down a little bit, and then out of nowhere, you just hear like, whoosh, you know, and the dude's about to land the finishing blow, and he's got a knife or a sword or whatever. And he's about to stab Shang-Chi, and I'm like, no, and then you hear the, and Shang-Chi looks up, and it's just Makari like gripping his fist, and she's zipped in out. I think if that kind of thing happens, simplest, easy.
I do think that would be really interesting interactions, just because everybody, like all of the Eternals, clearly understand her, and like they all know sign language, and just in case anybody was wondering, they were using ASL.
Yes.
And like having her interact with heroes that don't know sign language would be, I think, like an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. And like, not that I'm ever really in support of forcing characters with the similar traits together because they have the similar traits. But I'm not going to say who or anything, but after this film, there is at least one other character that has been introduced that is like a main character that is also deaf and uses sign language. So like, again, not that I'm saying they need to meet because they're both deaf and can sign to each other, but I think that
they probably
doesn't
find
detract from the
camaraderie
fact
in each other.
that's exactly what I was getting at, that it would still be interesting to see them cross paths one way or another. Because I think that whilst it can feel a little bit trite and a bit sort of forced, potentially if handled incorrectly, I think that seeing two super people signed to each other is inherently going to be even more representation and even cooler for anybody who themselves is deaf and uses ASL. So, and just in general, like I find it inspiring. So, hell yeah.
So one of the things while we're talking about Makari, just because I think it's really, really incredibly important, is talking about the representation in this film, because it doesn't just stop there, right? Like, so there is an Eternal that's deaf. There's a whole bunch of different people of different ethnicities, like so many, um and we got like uh gay representation
Mm-hmm.
with a kiss on the
Yep.
screen. I screamed a little. I was like, ah! I was excited about that. I think that like the amount of representation in this film kind of blew my mind,
Mm-hmm.
because everything before this, not that there's been no representation, but it's usually like, oh, here's one little thing. Like here's one thing for you guys.
Yeah.
Um this was so much all at once, and I really kind of loved it.
Yeah.
That's
And
my
like
feeling.
I would argue it was done well and it felt non-forced. Obviously, as you can surely imagine, there was a subset of people when this film came out, as with any film that has representation in it, that were Marvel's gone woke and I don't want this X person slash type of person in my entertainment, blah 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 blah. But like all of these characters were handled well for what they were,
Mm-hmm. I
and even
think.
if you did have performances, it's like
Mm-hmm.
well, it's just a performance. That's not a reflection on the ethnicity of the person or the gender of the person.
No, no, people can be bad actors and any ethnicity or
Yep.
gender. Um, what was I going to say? I think that like for me, the casting, all of the casting felt like it was whoever was best for this role for the most part. I think there's a couple of people that kind of stand out because it's like, oh, these are big actors, so they're trying to get more big names here. But I think
Angelina Jolie.
okay, but she was like really badass as Thena.
She, no doubt.
She did a great job. So
I'm just saying there are probably plenty of other people that could have played Thena as well, but
yeah,
they wanted the big name and they did it. They got her to sign on and do it, so fair play to them.
yeah. But I think that other than that, they did a really good job of like, I think just whoever fit the role
Mm-hmm.
and kind of adapting the role to that person. Or at least that's what it was like in my head. What it felt like at least. Um okay, where do we want to go? Okay, you guys, I've had to start while I podcast now. I have to write stuff down on a sticky note because otherwise my brain just like I can't focus on anything. So that's what I'm looking at. Okay, one thing that I think would have been interesting slash fun is we have Leah McHugh, right?
Mm-hmm.
A Sprite. I really kind of would have loved a non-binary person in that role.
I guess.
I think that Sprite, the way that they told, like the way that they played Sprite, like I understand it's like, oh, I want to be a like a person, but the way that they like kind of styled Sprite and stuff like that made them feel very non-binary.
Mm.
So I think it would have been interesting to lean into that. Not that I think that it's not that I dislike what they did with Sprite. Just I think that the way that they styled the character made it feel like that. And I think that would
Yeah,
have
I
been
mean,
interesting.
I think I agree in principle. I think like when you're dealing with, I guess technically, if you found a child actor that happened to be non-binary, you could style them. But I think that clearly there was some kind of not prerequisite, that's the wrong word, but like a idea in their heads of what they wanted Sprite to be. And
Mm-hmm.
Liam McHugh must have just clearly nailed the audition to some extent. And then they tried to, because she is like outside of this film, she presents very female.
Yes.
I'm not gonna assume how she identifies because I don't know, but she presents very feminine.
Yes.
So I think that they then, because of the nature of the character, tried to refine that. And I think like that works okay. Like again, like to your point of like casting the right person for the role, I think that whilst the non-binary angle for Sprite would have been interesting for sure, I don't think it's a necessity.
No, definitely not.
So because like it gets messy, but certainly when you're dealing with child actors, it can become a bit messy if you overtly make that a thing, right? Whereas you can just sort of imply that Sprite might not be conforming necessarily in the usual sense to either or, without saying anything about that. And I think that having a actress that isn't potentially, I don't know, non-binary isn't the be all and end all there. I'm not saying that you were saying it was the be all and end all, but I think like it's kind of a, if it was there, cool, but
yeah, that was what my comment was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to, the reason why I wrote down Sprite mostly is because I kind of wanted to talk about like, I feel like her story is, I think they all have compelling stories. I think that her story is one of the most compelling because so she is in love with Icarus for literally thousands of years, literally gets nothing in return and he just leaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, man, that's like this is one of the things where it's like the depth of this story is so incredible and they didn't, I feel like they just didn't hit enough with that piece. I don't know what I would have wanted out of it, but I think I could have used like more emotional beats around that to like really dig it in. But I really can't imagine loving somebody for that long and just getting nothing in return.
Yeah. Like again, I think it's another thing that can get quite messy. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're having a child actor that is playing someone that's thousands of years old that's in love with an adult actor,
Yeah.
it's sort of like, I think, how do I phrase this? If there was, they certainly had, maybe if there weren't like ratings and boards, approval boards and stuff, and trying to not be censored in too many places around the world, they might have been able to push the boat just a little bit further. And by that, I don't mean anything dodgy, obviously, but in terms of like diving into the psychology of that stuff. But I think that they would rather, I agree that it is very compelling, but I think that they needed to steer quite clear of that. And again, kind of more just infer and suggest those character elements than really dive deep on them.
You know, I think that maybe part of the issue was that Kingo was delivering these lines. Because I think that the way that it was like, oh, you guys didn't catch that? Like they were trying to deliver this almost as like this comedy piece, but it's like actually really kind of dark.
Mm.
And I just don't think that like that was delivered correctly. I think that that's part of it. I definitely understand it's like in real life, like this is like a kid actor and an adult actor, and of course, like we don't want anything weird happening. But I do also think that they could have had like just like more of the emotional pieces of like her having a conversation with Cersei, like her having a conversation with Ajax, like in the hit past, like thousands of years ago, like, hey, this just isn't gonna work out for you, or like stuff like that. Like just even like just conversations with other characters that are kind of like assessing what's going on, I think would have been enough. But
yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Okay, what else do we want to talk about? Okay. my okay, very important character, Karen. I think it's I can't remember how they said it. Karen, the driver.
Oh, Karun.
Karun. There we go. I'm like, I know I'm not saying it right. There you go. Thank you. He was such an incredible character. I think that he did so well. And I think that like the funny pieces that did hit for me came from him.
Yeah.
And him interacting with Kingo. Um dude, the whole thing of him just being like I get it, right? Like he's like, "Well, what am I going to do? Just go back and do nothing?" Like
Mm-hmm.
I loved his character so much, and I like the comedy pieces that he delivered was great. The whole bit of them like bringing the camera everywhere. The we need the action shot and like the did you get that and like stuff like that. And it's like off the screen. Yeah, I
Yeah.
got that. Like
Yeah.
some
I
of
think
those
like
pieces were so good.
I think that's the one part where it gets a bit too close to being overdone in terms of the
Yeah, it
comedy.
did.
It didn't ever cross that line for me. It's still funny, but I think they maybe made that whole recording things joke one too many times. But yeah, like Karun is like the substitute for the audience, really. More, he's the only really viable substitute for the audience
Hmm.
because he's the human that is caught up amongst all of these gods, essentially.
Yeah, I definitely think that in this case, because they've been around each other for so long, you do need that like the least knowledgeable character is the term.
Yeah.
In that in the group, because otherwise they wouldn't be explaining anything, right? Like
Hmm.
those conversations could have never happened without that person around.
Yeah.
Um, that's why there's a least knowledgeable character around most of the time.
Hmm.
Okay, what else are we gonna talk about? Okay, freaking okay, Richard Madden, Kit Harrington, you guys.
Reuniting.
Um, first of all, I don't know what that is referring to. Second
Game
of
of
all,
Thrones.
oh, okay.
That they were
Um,
brothers.
okay, you know what? That makes so much sense. I don't know if they did this on purpose, but I literally didn't. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention. I do kind of get distracted while I watch movies. I wasn't like on TikTok or anything, but I do get distracted. I just thought it was the same person. I was just like, oh. And then I was like, did he like forget her? Is this like a reincarnation thing? Is this like a lost memory thing? I was really confused at the beginning of the film. um, they look a little too similar. I get what they were trying to go for of like, oh, she's just, maybe they were trying to go for like a she's looking for somebody similar kind of vibe. I don't know for sure. But damn, do they look similar?
Yeah, I don't think there's any reasoning behind it. I think it's more just coincidental than anything else. I think that people were certainly making the Jon Snow um, and Stark jokes, which Game of Thrones stuff, that they
Haha.
were both cast in this. But I, again, I think Kit Harington's character could have been played by other people, but I
Yes.
think that probably around the time that this was cast, that the film was cast, the I don't want to speak out of turn, but it would have been around the time that um, Game of Thrones was like at its peak and they were building into like the final season or something.
Yeah.
When it
I'm
was
not saying
cast, not when this film came out, just for clarity for people.
I'm not saying that I don't like either cast or that I
No,
don't
I'm
think
not.
that they
I'm not
shouldn't be
saying.
in
I'm just
MCU, but
what
damn.
my point was that I think they just were trying to get as many. They were trying to sign on the dotted line with as many zeitgeist actors as possible and bring
Mm.
them in house. And they did that, and it just so happens that Kit Harington and Richard Madden kind of have similar aesthetics and whatnot. So, but I don't think it's any deeper than that.
Okay.
It's not like
Yeah.
they were saying Cersei has a type. I don't think.
Okay. Well, regardless, it confused me. So that was crazy. Anyways, okay. What else do we want to talk about? Let's talk about some of these characters. Let's talk about Ajak.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you steer the conversation. How do you feel about Ajak? How do you feel about her character? How do you feel about how her story concluded? How do you feel about how she handled things? Stuff like that.
I mean, I have to admit, I'm not a massive fan of Salma Hayek as an actress.
I don't know if I've seen her in anything.
I feel like most of the stuff she's in, she is kind of the same. So, like, in a way, she kind of runs into the same problem as Don Lee does with Gilgamesh. Like, she's, again, like I said, she's clearly far more fluent in English than Don Lee is, but I still think that there are momentary hiccups
I would agree.
where, like, the delivery of a line isn't quite right. She's got the cadence correct, but like the delivery and intonation is a little bit off, and that's like a really minor thing. But I think that she was framed as a character quite well. That she's the leader, she can heal people, which is a nice conceptual thing for a leader to be able to do. It's not a destructive, authoritative force, but more a nurturing, caring thing. That's nice, which is probably why they gender bent the role, because Ajak is technically a male character, but a more maternal instinct, I think, works well for how they present the character here. Yeah, and obviously she's used as sort of a catalyst for her death is used as a catalyst for the rest of the story unfolding. But beyond that, beyond the function of her character in the story, I don't really have that much to say.
Okay. I think it's interesting that she waited until the last week to kind of change her mind. I know that it's like interesting because of like story pieces or whatever, but like in terms of like thought process in world for her, I do think that that's like I think that that's interesting that she spent so long on this planet with so many different people and seeing like societies, you know, build and collapse. And then is like now in 2020 or 2021 or whatever it was, it's like now's my time.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest question I have, and it's really good that you brought it up, and I don't know what your opinion is on this, like, obviously it's set up that the Eternals are actually like essentially android robot things, and they have their memory wiped every time that they do this cycle of nurturing a planet so that it can birth a celestial. I never quite summed up one way or the other whether Ajak also had her memory wiped, and after the fact she is then bestowed the leadership and the knowledge of what their goal is. Do you know what I mean? Or whether she sustains all of those previous cycles and just knows that that is the function of the Eternals.
I don't think that, because I think that you could argue either way, because it could be like you said, that they are just reintroducing like, hey, you're the leader, this is what needs to happen, this is your true mission, now go execute it. Or if it's like she just retains her memories and so she already knows inherently. I think that you could argue either way. Based on the way that she spoke in the last scene that she is featured in with Icarus, where they're talking, based on the way that they spoke there and the way that that kind of played out, it made it feel like she still had retained her memories and understood what was going on. But
Interesting.
I think that you could argue the other way from earlier scenes where she says that Thena has that sickness, but she would know that it wasn't really a sickness, but her memory is just not being correctly wiped.
Yeah.
If she understood that their memories were wiped.
Yeah. Because the
So,
reason I bring, I that's bang on. I think because the reason I brought it up was to your point of saying like it's interesting she waited until the final week. That logic to me only really works of her waiting till the final week if she did have her memory wiped, because she's then given the directive after having done it, but obviously not knowing that she's already done it hundreds of times or whatever.
mm-hmm.
But then it's kind of like the cleanest analogy I can make is like when you are at a swimming pool or something and you think, oh, I'm going to dive off the highest diving board.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, you that's what you're going to do. You climb up the ladder and you get to the top and then you start walking out onto the board. And just as you're about to jump, you look down and you're like, oh, like, I think that is the only way that works in my head of
Yeah.
she's just been on this path, not necessarily on autopilot, but, you know, like, this is what we've been told to do. This is what we're doing. Yeah, I like these human people, but realistically, I'm not really weighing up the fact that I'm falling this far from the diving board and I'm going to splash when I hit and all of this until I get there. And then when you get to that final week, you then realize it's about to happen. You're going to have to do it. And the reality hits and sinks in that all of these people that you've cared for and nurtured for thousands of years, they're all going to die.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way that logic works to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think regardless, right? Because of the way that because of the way that the process works, she's dying regardless, right? Each time this happens. So she's either all of her memories are getting reloaded or she's just is being reloaded with her purpose. But I mean, I get what you're saying. The thing that I feel like I have a hard time with, like, is it feels like this whole piece is they have watched over multiple societies, right? That, like, the requirement is that there's enough beings that exist on this planet, right? Doesn't literally have to be humans. However, I have a really, really hard time to, like, believing that they've never experienced a planet with intelligent life. That is what's fueling, like, this celestial being born. So the thing that kind of bugs me is, like, there's nothing like it, another planet with intelligent life should be similar to Earth enough that you would understand that, like, we're killing all of these intelligent beings so that this thing is born, right? So, like, why why is it that Earth is the one that, like...
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's like, I guess it's framing humans in a very glorifying way, isn't it? By
Yeah.
saying we're worth saving and whatnot,
Yeah.
which again is an interesting conversation in and of itself. Is, are we worth saving? Which they kind of touch on, but also don't. I think like a super easy fix for this entire situation would have maybe been even just a very, very brief, or even just a couple of very brief teases, just visual, not necessarily commenting on it, almost of Ajak having the same mind breaking as Stina does, where her memories come back to her. Because then that kind of justifies either way, regardless of whether she, well, I guess but going down this train of logic, she would have to not remember, obviously, I guess. But if we saw in this last week when she made the decision to not follow through with the emergence of the memories of the previous cycles coming back to her, that could be the justification to a degree of why this time it was different. Because yes, she may well have had the same like drawbacks in her mind of like, oh, do we really want to follow through on this on a previous cycle or with whatever kind of life they were protecting and nurturing? But it would be then that it's not only her love for humans, but coupled that with now remembering all of these other potentially excellent societies and races and species that she let die or was forced to let die, that kind of push her into action. But we obviously don't have that. So the lingering question is why is this one different outside of the fact that we're humans? And so, but I'm with you.
Okay. Cool. Another thing I wanted to kind of touch on, obviously, is Icarus, just in general. A couple of the things that I specifically wanted to talk about is one, Icarus, like knowing, for that entire time. I think it's like the way that they handle that piece is so interesting. That he avoids Cersei, because he knows that like their death is coming, and he commits to it rather than trying to stop it. Because obviously like it's his mission or whatever. I really enjoyed that they like kind of had him pull away from her because of that, because I think that that's kind of it's something that humans do when they know that like almost unconsciously, like when you know somebody is like going to die, a lot of the times people will pull away because that makes them uncomfortable and they don't want to like deal with that. So I think that that's interesting that they went that route. And
Would you
go
not
ahead.
say alongside that? Would you not say alongside that though that it's also in not delusional, but like a misinformed sense that again a lot of humans do, where even if it's not necessarily that the person is dying, but just as simple as if there's bad news that would hurt the person that you care about, there is sometimes a tendency to recluse away from that in an effort to protect that person.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I think
And I
like
mean,
is that
he says
doubled
that,
up.
right? Right? He
Yeah.
says like I would have said, like I would have told her immediately and I don't want to hurt her. Um I think that like I really do believe that like his reasoning is multi-layered um as to why he's like avoiding her, whether he like wants to acknowledge it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is like obviously stuff that you're pulling from not the movie itself mostly, just kind of our interactions with the film. Um I don't know. I do think that humans have a tendency to do that. They have a tendency to not want to hurt people. I think most people, unless you're a really horrible person, don't want to hurt others. And I think that he would obviously, like, he obviously doesn't want to hurt Cersei. Um, but I do also think that it's like he's avoiding her. But I wish that he'd like understood that like their time was coming to an end and that he could have spent more time with her, because I think that that really would have been the right answer. But too late now.
I think there's also, not that we have to linger on it, but I think there is potentially an interesting read as well, which paints him in a more malicious, malevolent light, or a more, should I say, detached light, certainly, where he knows that the emergence is going to happen, they and all of humanity are going to die. But simultaneously, he is also cognizant of the fact that they'll both come back.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a chance that on the next cycle they could come together again.
Mm-hmm. There's a chance that they've loved each other in every lifetime they've lived.
Exactly. So I think like there is not that the film implies this in the slightest, but there is a takeaway that you could have where it's almost like knowing you're going to fail a test, right? And you kind of just resign yourself to that fact, and you're like, well, the next one I'll ace.
Yeah,
and it's sort of
I
like
mean,
this speed run of this game, I messed up, but the next one I'll get 100% right,
yeah.
which is disturbing.
I definitely think that that's like part of it as well, because he's not the leader. He doesn't have any of his like memories or anything obviously from before, but he's like given this secret from Ajax. very, very early on, right? And it just kind of has thousands of years to sit and eat at him. So I
Yeah.
don't think you're wrong. And like he is probably spending those years looking for justification within himself. Like my leader has told me this secret that nobody else knows. And my leader has also said that we have to continue this mission, that it's very
Yeah.
important, that we'll be able to live on even if we don't have our memories anymore. It will be okay.
Yeah. I also like, again, the questions that the film doesn't answer but are interestingly posed, even just subtextually. We know that they technically retain the memories, but they're sort of like hard locked away.
Mm-hmm.
Does that encapsulate like their personalities as well? Do you
Or
know
do
what I
they
mean?
like
Like,
change personalities each time? Or
that's what I mean, because we don't really know either way. Because if the idea is that they did, then he knows, Icarus knows, he's burdened with this information that it's going to end, but he knows that Cersei and him are kind of like hardwired to come together to some degree. I don't know. It's like that's super compelling as well and interesting, and the
yeah.
film doesn't do anything with it. So
So the thing is that like this is actually like, I mean, this is like more of like a bigger philosophical question of like what makes you you, right? And I think obviously like the scientific answer is nature and nurture, but I think that it goes back to the building block pieces where a lot of the times when you see people, like a lot of your memories make you who you are, but you will often see when people like lose their memories, they retain some of these pieces of themselves through that, just because it's like it is who they are. So I think that like it depends on how hard that reset is, right? Because like I don't think that you can, like, even with wiping all of their memories, there are still some core building blocks of your personality that just don't go away, or at least that's how it is for humans in general.
yeah, because like the
But
film,
they're not. So it's hard to say.
yeah, because like the film doesn't really tell you, are the Eternals and their personalities shaped by being around humans?
Mhm.
Because we obviously see them on the ship approaching Earth for the first time, but and Cersei and Icarus have that like minor interaction that you could surmise is potential mutual interest, but it's not enough. And it, like, to me, it always kind of felt a little more robotic. I mean, don't mean that technically literally, but also I guess so. And obviously, then their personalities come into effect and take shape far more in the rest of the films we get to know them. So, but because of the way the film's structured and the narrative is presented, I don't know whether there is a correlation between those two things or not.
Mm.
Because if Icarus is the exact same as he always is in, as we see him in this film, cares about Cersei, is kind of like second in command to Ajax, and is super loyal to the Celestials no matter what, then he has nothing to worry about by doing the reset, because again, he'll just follow the same path and he'll be with Cersei for a while, and maybe this time, because they're not around humans next time, she won't be drawn away from him somehow. So it's like I don't know. The film doesn't tell me. It's
No,
frustrating, and I want to know because it's so interesting. It's the most interesting thing the MCU's presented to us, I'd argue.
yeah, I definitely think that there's so much story to be had here, and so much, like, so many interesting conversations to be had here.
Mm-hmm.
Um I think that, like, yeah. Um I'll come back to that because I don't want to get off topic really quick. While we're talking on memories, um I did want to point out one piece, just because I, like, as we're talking, it kind of stuck out to me, is
Mm-hmm.
when Thena gets sick, quote unquote. Ajax basically says, like, let's just get rid of your memory because you'll still be you. So I think that kind of is like indicative of like what happens when they reset, probably, because Ajax knows what's happens, like what's happening and what does happen, right? Um, so if she's not worried about like completely resetting Thena and getting rid of all of her memories, and she's like, oh, you'll still be the same person, like she obviously like has that like foresight, like, and that knowledge of like what would happen. So
That's true. That's true.
The other thing I was going to say is like, I think that one of my favorite moral questions, and I think that it's interesting to consider like what makes something human, because we often like talk about this like this group compassion, this group love, this group whatever it is, as like humanity, but like really, like I would say that like even though they're not human, like they do display like what we would characterize as humanity.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very interesting moral and philosophical question. It's one of the reasons why I really love Near Automata, because they kind of explore that question. But I do think that it's interesting that they present that here as well.
Yeah.
Question for you. Am I wrong? Icarus is not dead, correct? Or at least we don't know. Like, we didn't see him literally die. So MCU rules / general movie rules, if you don't see somebody actually die, they might still be alive. And even sometimes when you do see somebody die, they might still be alive.
That I would say is a fair assumption.
Okay. Just making sure I read that correctly. Because I'm like, am I dumb?
Again, it kind of gets messy with the Eternals, because technically there are infinite or potentially infinite numbers of them, but of the people, because it could just be another android robot.
You know what would be interesting is if he purposefully killed himself so that he would reset. But because he was technically connected to the Eternal, like, or to the Celestial for a moment, right?
Yeah.
So he may have theoretically been able to reset. Like, maybe the memories were too much, but then he'll come back a new, fresh Eternal and fall in love with Cersei all over again.
Like, or he'll just come back a little bit sunburnt. One or the other.
Yeah. Maybe he'll just, he just got a little
maybe the next time we see him, it's him just plopping back out of the sun and being like, that didn't work.
He's like, that was a good vacation.
It took me 5 years to get from one side to the other. That's not how big the sun is.
I will say, I really want to talk about like Richard Madden's performance, like when he brings Ajax back, and like that, like his whole like breakdown and crying and stuff. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah.
And I thought that the emotions of that scene, like, again, this is like something, it's like, it's so interesting, right? Because you love this person because you've been following them for thousands of years. You know that everything's coming to an end. You like kind of regret killing this person, but you know it had to happen. And like, or at least in your justification in your head, like that whole like emotional, like, is such like a knot of like, how do you even start to deal with those feelings? He needs therapy, is what he really needs.
Yeah, like he is kind of like a radicalist, right? He is a devout religious follower of Arishem. He is, and clearly will do anything to see this, like, not that we have to turn it into a religious thing, but it kind of like it's talking about mythology and gods and creation and all of these things. So it's like he is trying to enact Arishem's, in essence, holy mission that is bestowed upon him by essentially literally God. And like, unfortunately, there is real world reflections of that where people feel so emboldened by religious text and doctrine that has been embedded in them again over thousands of years, both literally for the Eternals, but just culturally and societally in real life, that vile and unforgivable acts are committed on real, oftentimes innocent people. And I think that that's really interesting, because Icarus is essentially Superman, like that.
Mm-hmm.
He is just Marvel's
I wanted
Superman.
to bring that up as Superman.
He has laser eyes, he can fly, he can take a real beating.
That's so funny to me. That's such an FU to DC. They
I mean,
they
they
can't even
even
make a single good Superman movie, right? And they
hey,
and Marvel does it.
I made that statement over the past couple of weeks. It holds true. And like, they
That's
even
so
name drop
funny.
Superman, don't they?
Yeah.
Because they talk about Icarus not having a cape.
He's like, "Oh, should I call you Clark?"
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think he isn't just evil Superman. I think he's far more compelling than that, but he is disturbing, and the intentionally disturbing in the kind of ideals that he represents. Though it is fair to point out that not that necessarily that he redeems himself, but he very clearly has a change of conscience by the end of the film, to whatever degree, I would argue, because he has the chance to kill Cersei, right, to stop her from doing it, and he doesn't. He nearly does. He lights them eyes up, but he stops. So, I think that he simultaneously represents the dangers of blindly following orders, following what you believe is right. But also he does embody the promise of there is still redemption possible for those people. Nobody is ever, and I'm speaking generally here, of course there are definitely exceptions to this rule, but nobody is ever too far gone, right? As a sentiment, I think, is a worthwhile one. So
See, this is, I think, that moment in particular at the end is a moment that I just really want that to be written, because like especially if it was like from like an omniscient point of view, like experiencing his thoughts and Cersei's thoughts of like him kind of needing to kill her for the mission, but he can't, even though he knows that she'll come back. And like he just like literally can't kill her, fails his mission, but then you have to assume that he like almost feels relief, right? Because the mission's over, like he can't accomplish the mission anymore. And he still gets to have Cersei, and they still get to be them. But he's also failed, and he's also done all this horrible stuff, and it's like getting like just like a little peek at the emotions behind that would be so brilliant. I would love that. What on the topic of Superman, just because I really love it, I love that the way that they like built these characters into like human history. I always think it's fun when movies and stories do that. It's like, oh, you think that it's actually like Athena, that like, the goddess of war, but that's actually based on Athena. Stuff like that, and it like being based on like Olympus and stuff like that.
I agree. Retroactively, without saying any spoilers, I will say there is stuff that comes after this that makes this very confusing. That sentiment very confusing.
Oh, good.
And it's probably just a creative decision that they took in this film, and then either was overlooked or dismissed. But there is contradicting evidence for the idea that the mythology of the gods and from different cultures is purely based around these Eternals, which is, again, I really liked it, particularly when this film came out. Obviously I didn't have this foresight, but yeah, it is a bit, we'll get there when we get there, but it is interesting that there is a disconnect in the stuff that follows this.
Bummer. Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I think for me, the last person that I kind of wanted to touch on is Cersei. I don't have a lot to say about her character, to be completely honest. It's not that I didn't enjoy her character. I think that like the actress did a great job. I think that she like the character was really interesting. But I think in the way that like everybody else moves around Cersei, it almost makes her character feel like a nothing character,
Mm-hmm.
even though she's not.
Yeah.
So I don't think I really have too much to say about her.
Yeah, she's kind of just the protagonist.
Yeah, capital T, capital P.
Which isn't a bad thing, and she does cool stuff and she has good lines and stuff. I think she acts it well, but it's just a bit of a nothing burger ultimately. And it's certainly not done her any favors when the more interesting arcs and thoughts and provocations come from most of the other Eternals. And by most of the other Eternals, I not only mean most in terms of most of the other Eternals have more interesting arcs, but yeah, she's fine. Also, interesting little tidbit, which means absolutely nothing, but fun trivia. Second time this actress has appeared in Marvel.
That's what I was just looking at. She was in Captain Marvel.
She was the woman with the blue woman with the sniper rifle.
Oh, fun.
But she's dead. And I guess they liked the actress and wanted to bring her back, so they did.
Good on them.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I think that, like, again, just to reiterate on this character, like, I think that because of her character is like, if you get down to the core building blocks of her character is like love, like whether it's like consistently loving those around her, consistently loving humanity in general, like that's kind of like she's just a very constant is like how I would describe her character. And I think because she's constant and there's not really any changes, that's kind of why she kind of is this like nothing burger for me.
Yeah, because like there's tons of like thematic interesting stuff technically, because she's outside of Gilgamesh the most empathetic Eternal, and I think that goes hand in hand with the fact that her power is to literally change things through physical touch. You know, so like there is something there of the empath who is the protagonist literally can change things by touching them and having that tangible connection with something. But again, the film doesn't really do anything with that. Not that they had to, because that I think is a complicated thing that is interesting in and of itself, but wouldn't really serve the film necessarily. But still worth pointing out nonetheless, because yeah, outside of the intricacies that you can pick apart again after the fact, she is kind of just saying she's just there feels derogatory, but it is kind of true.
It is true. Yeah, I mean, I think that she is another in the way you know, that we have like our least knowledgeable character. She similarly feels like a vessel for the audience.
Yeah.
So okay, last thing here for me is talking about one Mr. Harry Styles.
Yep.
Were you waiting for that one, or?
I knew it was going to come out.
Yeah, it has to, right?
I mean, yeah, how could it not?
Under a particular name, Eros, which for those that don't know, for some reason, is erotic love, typically.
Indeed.
Agape is the other one, in case anybody wanted to know. I know that from anime. So he's presented as Thanos' brother. He's presented with a hobbit dwarf.
It's a gnome. No, it's good old Pip the Troll.
And
that's not a joke. That's his actual name. Pip
no,
the Troll.
yeah. Yeah, I couldn't remember his name, but
Yeah.
as soon as you said it, I remembered. It's just um they've come to the Eternals. They're going to help the Eternals, and they know where the others are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be so okay, you guys. If nothing else works out, I'm gonna be so bummed if Fastus doesn't get to just be his little gay dad self. Please, if Marvel's listening, that's all I
Wait,
need.
what? I just got whiplash. What just happened? We were just talking about Eros, weren't we?
Yeah, we were, and we're still going to, but I'm just listen. Like he's saying we're gonna go save them, and I'm saying in saving
Oh, I
them,
see. I see. I see. With you.
if you don't let him be his gay dad self. Also, if you don't bring back his son, that's a disappointment. That's a real disappointment. The actor, I think, coming back in like 10 years as a hero would be kind of cool. Because he was promised that he could go to space when he got his learning permit.
Maybe.
So I think that'd be a cool payoff. But anyways, coming back to Arrows. We don't really have much else here. We do have to come back to Kit Harington's character as well. But
Hmm.
there's not much else here. I'm interested. From what I understand, I could totally be wrong, but from what I understand, Harry Styles has actually done like a lot of work with acting, and has like kind of become like a really good actor at this point, rather than just like a musician. I don't know. Hold on, I can't remember the name of the movie. Oh, that confused me. I
Don't worry,
cannot.
darling.
Probably that one. Yeah.
Dunkirk.
I don't know. I think it'd probably Don't Worry, Darling. I don't think it's Dunkirk. I don't know. But hopefully, because I mean, not that he was bad in this scene. I thought that he was very charismatic. I thought he was good, but I'm worried to see him in extended role. So I'm hoping that like the work's been put in, or at least that's what I've heard.
You've heard wrong.
Oh, sad.
Harry Styles is a pretty bad actor.
He's very handsome though.
I mean, yeah, nobody's denying that, but you know, you can only get so far on looks alone. So yeah, um, I'm not confident. I mean, I might as well say now, like none of these characters have shown up again since so far. So what you've seen is all we've got of the Eternals so far. I imagine partly because the film wasn't received great and didn't make tons of money. But yeah, so I'm not holding out hope for. I'm sure he'll show up because you're going to sell tickets if you have Harry Styles in the film, even if it's to the film's detriment. But yeah, no, like introducing Thanos' brother is interesting in and of itself. You know, the potential discussions that could come out, speaking with maybe other characters that he runs into that actually took part in killing Thanos. Also, technically, I guess, does set up and like solidifies the fact that there are other Eternals out there. You know, these aren't the only Eternals, so there are probably other clusters of Eternals on other planets elsewhere in the universe that are doing the same thing. And you would assume from how Harry is acting that have maybe taken the same steps that our group of Eternals has, so in terms of sort of stepping away from serving the Celestials.
Do you think it like I think it'd be interesting if the if they're lying to the Eternals that like this hasn't actually happened before, like, and that every single time the Eternals stop it, and they're like, just like, not that I'm saying that they are doing that, but I do think that would be interesting of like they continuously are doing this experiment to see if they can get any of the Eternals to comply with the mission.
Yeah, I think
it
that could be
always fails.
something. I think that could definitely be something that they do in like a specific section. I don't think that across the board that is like the grand scheme. Because I think, again, not that the film really tells us, but the sentiment is that Celestials are being born, not all the time, but relatively frequently in the wide scope of the cosmos. So for that inherently to happen, it means that the plan does have to go through. But yeah, no, I think that again, in terms of what this film does best, is introduce interesting thoughts, trains of thought. That would be another equally compelling one. So,
Okay. Am I missing anything with Kit Harington's character? Because I did not have any concept of who he was.
no,
It made
I mean,
it feel like I should know, but I'm like, huh?
I mean, you only know if you know. But like throughout the film, he suggests that he has family trouble.
Yeah, and he has to go reconcile with his uncle, right?
Yeah. And he's got like a ring with like a signet on it. Again, we haven't seen him since, and I legitimately don't know if he'll reappear. I would hope he does, but there is a chance that he's not, him specifically, not going to show up, which I feel would be a shame. But on the off chance that he doesn't, I'll just give you like brief context. Dane Whitman, his character, is called the Black Knight in the comics.
Any relation to the Moon Knight?
No, not at all. Okay. He's one of the people that hold the mantle of the Black Knight. And more often, that sometimes the Black Knight is actually like a super villain, because the sword that you see him checking out in the post credits has like the family curse. I can't remember what the quote was off the top of my head, but it's something to do with death, right? I think.
Yeah.
So like the sword gives insane strength and power, but equally kind of like, to my understanding, corrupts the person that holds it, and sort of the person has to have strong enough to resolve to fight off those dark urges, or they just like succumb to it. So he's clearly then in that post-credit scene debating, knowing that the family troubles is that he's had this curse over his family of the people that wield the sword in his family, almost like a coin toss of are they all right, or do they become evil and start killing people? But that's the general sentiment, and he's got like a cool set of like medieval armor, typically, that the Black Knight wears.
I did like the animation with the sword, like the way that the sword was kind of like
alive almost.
It was like, touch me.
Yeah. Sort of reacted to his finger getting close. Yeah. So that's the general summation of it. And there are plenty of places that he could show up. Because Bree, this is real inside baseball. Because it's not suggested or teased, and this might not even mean anything to you. But if you will recall, in that post-credit scene, there was somebody else in the room that spoke to him off screen.
Oh yeah, was that what's his face? Why am I not remembering his name right now? Never mind. I'm gonna not guess because I can't remember his name.
General, who somebody we've already seen.
Yes. Hold on.
I'm gonna wait.
Okay, please do. You're gonna be so upset. Nick Fury.
Of all the possible answers, that one did disappoint me the most.
Yeah, I knew it would.
No, it is not Nick Fury, because technically that was a trick question because it's not somebody that we've met yet. That voice belonged to one Mahershala Ali, who, if you don't pay attention, you wouldn't know. But the year before this came out, maybe 2 years before, he was announced at a Comic-Con to be playing Blade.
Oh yeah, I've been wanting to watch that. Not that it's out, but
it's not out, but it's coming soon, hopefully. I don't know. Yeah, he was announced as Blade for the MCU, and that is him speaking to Dane. So could he show up in the Blade?
Aaron.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff. Could he show up in the Blade film? Dane, I mean, maybe. That's the assumption. I don't know if the plans have changed due to the reception of this film. But like, of all of the, in a film that introduces tons of brand new characters that we've never met before, that is a very subtle, underhanded way to implement a very big, high-profile actor as a character that a lot of people have been clamoring for, to not even to see him and to not even really tell people that that's who that is. It's an interesting approach, particularly now that we've waited so long after the fact and we still haven't met him properly. It's wild, but you know, it's interesting trivia nevertheless. I suppose that is, I guess, Blade's debut in the MCU, which is not what I ever would have guessed, but there we are.
I will say, I just found out that he's 50 years old.
He is.
And he does not look 50 years old.
He does not.
Very handsome man.
Which is why Marvel need to get on it and make the film before he gets too old.
You know what's so funny? It's like, genuinely, I really did think it was Nick Fury, but I was like it doesn't really sound like Nick Fury, but maybe they're trying to make it like not obvious that it's him. Like that was like the line that my brain followed.
Yeah, there were people also at the time, and I mean like directly after this film out, because it got confirmed who it was very quickly, if you were looking in the right places. But people were also speculating that it could have been the Watcher from What If, speaking to him. Because again, Jeffrey Wright kind of has a similar voice to Nick Fury, which kind of has a similar voice to Mahershala. In terms of, you know, like that deep voice. But yeah, it was not either Nick Fury or Jeffrey Wright. But there we go.
There we go. Okay, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about with this film? Any other characters, themes, through line pieces, story pieces?
I mean, we didn't really talk about the visuals of the film. I think are pretty stellar. The scale of the Celestials and everything is amazing and is so much bigger than anything we've seen up to this point. And just conceptually what that does for this universe going forwards, I think is interesting. The fact that there is now a partially emerged Celestial frozen as a permanent structure on Earth, that is going to be maybe interesting going forwards. Who knows? And again, just more thematic, interesting stuff that we haven't touched on is all there. We could talk for a long time, but I think the main points we've covered.
Okay. So let's go ahead and do our ranking. Firstly, I'll really quick would like to add Barry Keoghan's character to my simplest. Okay, you guys. So my simplest as of right now is Shang-Chi, Loki, Okoye, Bucky, but only from What If long hair version very specifically. Then Doctor Strange, then Heimdall, then Captain America, only from Infinity War. And that's in all caps.
Hmm.
I think I'm going to have to put him at number 2.
That's
As
high.
of right now. I'm going to put him below Shang-Chi, above Loki. Again, I suspect Loki's going to move to spot 1 during season 2 of Loki. But we're not there yet, so I'm just living it day by day, movie by movie. We'll make it there eventually. Okay, ranking list. Where would you place this movie? My guess area, I'm going to guess that you're going to put it in the, let's see, somewhere between 9 and 14. That's my range.
You're just shy.
Okay.
This is gonna be 15 for me.
Above Black Widow.
Just above Black Widow and just below Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Okay.
Which, in the grand scheme of things, is still decent. You know, it's more middle of the road, but it's still on the positive side of middle of the road. I just think that every project above it is more comprehensively put together, even if they're more narrow in focus.
Okay, any guesses on mine?
Actually, I haven't got a clue.
That's good, because I don't either.
Yeah.
So here's my thing. I'm not going to, but I'm very tempted to put this at number 2.
Whoa.
The reason being, not because it's obviously like the best film, but I think that this film is closest to what I'm actually interested in, like in terms of like types of stories, themes of stories, stuff like that. Like I think that like this film is very much intersects with like my interests, and I would kill to read like a book that's just like the Eternals but done well. And I think that it would have like the potential to be like, you know, like a really incredible book, like, you know, 10 out of 10, whatever. But because of like the execution of the film, I think that like I have to move it down the list, not because I necessarily want to move it down the list, but I just think it just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put it at spot 8 in my list,
Okay.
which puts it below Far From Home and above WandaVision.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you guys, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us today. Special shout out to our current patrons. We've got Alpaca Tom, Fabulous Brianna, Brianna's mom, Brianna's brother, Lindsay, Nikolai at Night, Cypher Primus, Brendan Myers, Marcus O'Neill, Lillian, Mimi J, David Hotwright, Dave Harp, the Xbox Expansion Pass, and Lee Navarro. Sam, where can people find you?
Well, I mean, I will tell people where they can find me, but I will probably say what we're watching next first.
Oh, yes, please do.
Taylor isn't here to Taylor isn't here to
God,
share
I don't even want, no.
It's finally happening. We are going to be doing, and my executive decision is, as of right now, we are just doing the first season, and that alone, of Daredevil.
Taylor's gonna freak out.
He is.
Okay, you guys, for context, I'm so serious. So our co-host from No Limits has asked Sam if we're going to watch Daredevil. Unironically, at least 10 times. Like minimum 10 times. Every time we talk about this show, like, are we caught up yet? He'll be like, oh, are you planning on watching Daredevil? He just like literally forgets it every single time. Oh, it's so funny, you guys, because he's so serious and so excited about it every time. It's like he's a kid opening a present. He's like, oh. And yeah, so that's why I was like, oh no, I started laughing because like I can't deal with it. But um so thank you guys. Okay, legit, where can people find you?
Yes, people can find me anywhere and everywhere at Sam Heaney, Heaney.
You can find me at Fabulous Brianna, FabulistBreanna, and I hope you have a good 2 weeks. We will see you when we have watched Daredevil just for Taylor. See you then.